Video log Thursday, July 2nd, 2026. Michael Cook speaking. It's currently 11:30-ish p.m. Michael Cook speaking. It's nighttime right now. I have the helmet on. I had some stuff I wanted to talk about, like what I've been working on. So normally I would just make an audio log talking about this stuff, but I got a lot of work done today on my module, Fighting Entropy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Fighting Entropy is a module that I wrote for PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, and I had plans on extending it to work for Linux. So with the last version of my module from 2024.1.0, that's the last version, I have a bunch of functions in PowerShell. Some of those functions rely on other functions that I wrote. Some of them rely on commands that are part of Windows. And a lot of those functions won't work on Unix or Linux because some of the assemblies are not available on Linux. So I try to talk about this a lot in my audio logs, but the work that I wound up doing today was basically, the last few months I've been working on Fighting Entropy, updating it, translating the PowerShell code that I wrote to C#, but realizing that a lot of the commands that I wind up using in PowerShell, I either have to like open up like a console or run space and then run the command and get the output back. But in a lot of cases, that's overkill, right? Anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, this is going to sound like Chinese. Ultimately, I have conceptualized a bunch of classes. Sorry it's super dark here. I was trying to find a place that was light enough. But, you know, it was like 100 degrees today. Way too hot to be like going around. So I had to make a bunch of classes that they don't do anything. They're just kind of like DTOs. Data transfer objects. So data transfer object is basically a class that you can use like either on Windows or Linux and it'll still work. And then basically you use inheritance, class inheritance, to be able to extend those abstract classes. In some cases you have to wind up using the abstract access modifier, C#. I'm relatively new to writing C#, like a lot of it, and I still don't know all the caveats, and I'm still adhering to like older conventions. Like I'm not using modern C# syntax to write what I'm writing because I want it to be backward compatible with, you know, the original version of PowerShell. Well, not the original version, but 5.1. Like my module needs to work on Windows 10 and Windows 11 as well as Linux. And there's a bunch of distributions of Linux, so, and they all differ slightly, but there is a way to aggregate their differences to some extent. So yeah, that's what I've been working on. Try to get a face shot in even though it's kind of dark. Yeah, this is not a very easy process actually. Taking all the classes that I wrote in PowerShell and then taking apart those classes so that they could just be a data type, or I guess you could say they'd be a struct. But the point is, a lot of my classes that I've been working on, they need to be serializable. So what that means is that anytime the program is used to like capture information on a particular system, it's going to be able to save it to a file and then deserialize it later. So like I could run the tool on one computer and then export this deserialized information and then import it on another system. And it doesn't matter if it's a Unix or Windows system, it'll still be able to pull up those reports. So I have gotten a lot of this forensic type level shit done a while back, but I wanted to make a demonstration that ties all of the stuff together. And that has taken months for me to kind of conceptualize and plan, because a lot of my classes in the PowerShell, the last version that I released, like there's redundant class declarations because of the way PowerShell works. Whereas in C#, you really don't have to worry about like the organization of like classes. You can write a class out of order and then it will still compile effectively together. And that's relatively new to me. But you know, I had this idea of like doing the same sort of thing I'm doing now in PowerShell, but having to do it that way was just way more complicated, like with formatting what I was doing, and you know, ensuring that like if I was reading a report from another system, it wouldn't like overwrite, it wouldn't grab information from the current system. Yeah, that was a pain in the ass. And then like trying to figure out how to format everything. You know, like ChatGPT and Copilot are out now, so like they can give me like helpful tips that'll like prevent me from wasting hours and hours, like writing some certain approach that will break. You know, like, I don't know, I have literally spent thousands of hours writing PowerShell. You know, some people will probably say, well, what sort of stuff have you written in PowerShell? And I'll say, well, a module called FightingEntropy, and the VM controller is part of that. New FE infrastructure is part of that. Invoke SimDB is part of that. Each of those things is a complicated project on its own right, and I found a way to like, you know, get it you know, nested within my my function, so that like, you know, at some later point, if I wanted to continue to develop it, then, you know, I just install the latest version of the module and then start, you know, chipping away at it. But yeah, it's super dark right now. It's like 100 degrees yesterday and today, so I don't know. My mind is kind of like stuck on programming right now, so I wanted to talk about it, and not necessarily just talk about it, but, you know, kind of dive a little bit more deeply into it, dissect like what it is that I'm doing now. So my module is turning into an assembly really quickly. Like, I can't get away without compiling it with Roslyn. I used to use Visual Studio to write C, like Razor and Blazor and ASP.NET. I used to use Visual Studio for that, but now I feel a lot more comfortable like basically writing just about everything in Visual Studio Code. You know, Visual Studio Code developed by Microsoft, and you know, I at the suggestion of one of the guys that work at Microsoft on the VS Code team, he's like, yeah, you should stop using PowerShell ISE because we're not going to update that ever again. I was like, oh really? He's like, yeah. And you should use Visual Studio Code. It's the shit, dude. I was like, fine, I will. And he was like, fine, cool. Yeah, no, the conversation didn't go exactly like that, but yeah, I think his name is Tyler. I can't remember his last name right now, but yeah. I have communicated with several employees at Microsoft, either current or former, right? And I'm not going to get too like deeply invested in talking about that, but what I will say is that I have worked on a lot of Microsoft stuff, like whether it's the operating system, tying together like server type stuff, and MDT and WDS and Windows Server Update Service. Actually, I didn't really get too deeply invested in that because I don't know, managing WSUS is kind of a pain in the ass, and I thought like I had kind of like a cool idea to slipstream updates into the packages. I don't know, it's something that I learned to do back in Windows XP. I don't know, you could slipstream the updates rather than like download them, which means that like you create the installation media and you put the updates onto the image or whatever. And then I think DISM does support that to some extent with import packages. You know, I wrote a lot of like API type stuff in the last couple months that works with DISM, deployment and image servicing module, and WMI, Windows Management Instrumentation, coming up with my own implementation of that, because using like get WMI object, the PowerShell function, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's mistake prone. Making this video as an extension of the video I just made. It's a little dark here. I'm trying to find like bright places to go to while I'm talking and stuff. Try to keep it somewhat interesting with the bike. You know, it cut off like what I was saying. It does that a lot. I had to be more considerate at the time. Making my own implementation of WMI, because a WMI will often throw an error in a lot of my classwork, like get WMI object, the PowerShell function. It'll say like object reference was null or not set to an object, whatever the hell it says. And I had to find a way to like make sure that I could use WMI monikers and the various strings that you could feed WMI. So WMI kind of works a lot like the registry in some sense. It keeps like a hierarchical order of all the objects within a Windows system, and you know, it allows access to deeper components of the operating system. You know, anytime that you turn the computer on, it's got a bootstrap like WMI and a whole bunch of other shit like the registry, the file system, services, processes, you know, the kernel. All this stuff has to do, like, load up, like, it has to initialize in order. You can't initialize it out of order, otherwise it'll screw up a bunch of other stuff. And, like, as I continue to build these classes and namespaces, right, I'm going to talk about the current namespace structure, because I'll probably wind up splicing it in video that shows some of my programming work. So, anyway, the main namespace is FightingEntropy, and within that I have like a format namespace that'll handle certain primitives like date time and byte size and sort of like, I don't know, shorthand. Like in PowerShell, if you type in the console 1 GB and you press enter, it'll return the correct string, like 1074 or something bullshit. And there's a lot of places in C# where you can't do that. Well, you can't do that at all in C#. You have to like do a little bit more operations and math, and it is a little bit more reactive and responsive than PowerShell, because PowerShell wraps everything within like a PS object and touches into reflection to determine what specific property is, what specific type, and what the value is, and etc. and so forth. All right, so like as I'm talking, these are the things that go through my mind as I'm like writing all this stuff for my module. All right, so format is a sub namespace of FightingEntropy that has the primitive types that I discussed. And then there's another namespace called core, and within core I have like my right theme wrapper that I covered back in March 30th in software engineering. And then I also have the console, the custom console that I came up with, which will save all the things. Like anytime that I want to write something to the console, I don't use console write line. I write it to the module console, and then I also give it some sort of associated flag. Like it can be a negative number or a positive number, and that, like, I have a future designation for that particular thing. But ultimately, anytime that like something is successful, it'll set like a status of 1, and if something like wasn't successful, or like I don't know, like it didn't matter if it was successful or not, then it would be like 0 or -1. Boy, you could set it to 100 to mark like fully complete. Right, so like I came up with that like a while back. Like a few years ago, I came up with like a video of FightingEntropy and new FE infrastructure, and in that particular video, I had all this stuff kind of like compartmentalized within functions. And I can get away with getting all this stuff into C# namespaces now. So the core namespace has the things that I mentioned, the theme wrapper and the console object. but it will also contain the module itself. And the module itself is going to touch on other namespaces such as the Windows namespace and the Linux namespace. So within those namespaces, I have to do like stuff particular with each operating system. So within the Windows namespace, I have to call the assemblies that I use, and you know, do whatever with that. And on the Linux side, I have to develop things that work in a parallel manner. So I won't be able to do like things specifically copying one another. I'll be able to, I don't know, kind of getting a little overwhelmed trying to talk about it and remember exactly what I'm working on and then explain it, you know, in a way where like I'm not right in front of it. So I have a platform class in the core namespace that just holds the data type objects, which I mentioned earlier, right? And basically, they're just meant for like serializing and deserializing the sort of objects that come back in the operating system. So like if you use like certain PowerShell functions like get child item, you'll get a whole bunch of files. But if you use my file system namespace, then it will return custom objects. And those custom objects, they use stuff like pinvoke on the Windows side. And on Linux, I won't be able to use pinvoke, so I have to use a different method, which will just sort of basically be a more responsive file system, I think. So, I don't know. One of the things that I did was package management. So opening up a package, getting the content of the package and sorting it all out appropriately, and then making sure that the package, whenever I run the function and I want to see the content of a particular package, you know, it's able to read that. That is something that I started working on in Q3A Live, but I might as well incorporate that into the module, and that's what I've been like coming to terms with. A lot of the stuff that I wind up writing in the C# conversion, I wind up realizing that I gotta like get away from PowerShell commands and then start writing like .NET classes under basically the code that's underneath the functions in PowerShell. And so like there's a bunch of Active Directory commands in PowerShell. I have to eventually get to like coming up with a way to manage that. There's a bunch of commands that touch on like the Microsoft deployment toolkit, DLL, and a bunch of other stuff. Like, you know, my explanation right now is just scratching the surface. Like I am not even like if I was like ambitious, I would say, oh yeah, I'll have this done in a couple months. But I know that's total bullshit. Like this is gonna take me well over a year to like fully do all this stuff at the rate that I'm going. I don't know. Maybe it won't take me a full year to get a new version of this up. But I don't know. As time goes by, I have like additional ideas, and then I wind up. With the additional ideas that I have, I wind up implementing new additional classes. Right? And sometimes I'll spend like several days on a new idea until I have something that is complete and it's like it works in unison and it's not mistake prone. It handles a whole bunch of errors. That is what I spend most of my time doing. Or like a lot of times I'll have like Copilot. I'll have Copilot translate something, right? And then I have to scrutinize what Copilot is returning. Well, a lot of people are vibe coders, but I'm not a vibe coder. I am scrutinizing basically just about everything that Copilot spits out. I have a pretty high standard for the code that I write. And a lot of times I get frustrated with like Copilot or whatever, and I just don't use it, you know. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's going to do it for this particular video. I talked a lot about like my work last few months, Q3 Live, FightingEntropy, WMI, and Linux. And that's what I'm going to be continuing to work on over the next few months. So, and look.